I'm Crystal Trammell of rethinkbirth.com, and I hope that you get a lot out of this. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and let you guys see what we're working with. All right, so there we have it. So if you're watching this video, you should also have access to this PDF guide called Navigating Birth in the System. And I wrote this because I want to be able to bridge a gap. There are people who really want a holistic, natural birth, but maybe they're not ready or able to access the kind of services or the kind of options that they want. And so if this is you, I completely understand. I've been there. I've had 5 different births of my own, ranging from hospital birth that was good to not so good, all the way into birthing center, home birth, and free birth. So especially through my time working as a doula and realizing that really my calling was more as a birth keeper, I came to understand that even in the most wonderful, amazing, holistic-minded care practices and providers, their hands are tied to an extent. They're beholden to a system, and it's not a judgment or an attack. It's just the nature of the beast. And understanding their limitations and parameters can help you go a long way in being able to have the kind of sovereign, holistic, natural birth that you really desire. So let's jump in. First of all, congrats, obviously. As we said, a midwife or OB that you've got working within the system, they have licensing, they have regulation, they've got oversight that they need to deal with. And sometimes there's insurance companies, directors. There are things that they can't necessarily help. So even if they really want to support you in having a holistic birth, there might be a conflict going on there. And so understanding that a midwife's protocols do limit them to an extent, unless they are a traditional midwife, aka a radical birth keeper who is attending births outside of the system, beyond the system, they may have some regulations that they have to abide by. So it's important to understand that we never really see truly unhindered birth, because often the first intervention that a woman will have is when she leaves her own home, her nest, her sacred space, to go to get an outside opinion on, am I in labor? Are things doing okay? Do I need to get all these tests? Do I need to be monitored? These are the first kind of interventions. And often we can go within rather than externalize finding about that information. So in this guide, we'll talk about perspective and insight on what medically managed births look like, because it's important, even if you are planning a free birth, it's good not to go in with your head in the sand. It's good to understand the kinds of things that you're wanting to avoid and why and how they end up sneaking in. In other words, the cascade of interventions. You may have heard that phrase, you may not have. And we'll also talk a lot about what a normal unhindered labor and birth looks like, and what kind of comfort measures and coping techniques that we can use, and what you can reasonably expect during your labor without intervention. I understand that home birth is not for everyone, and yet I am a home birth advocate because it remains the safest choice for a majority of low-risk women. In other words, if your body was healthy enough to get pregnant, it's highly likely that you are a great candidate for home birth. Pregnancy is not a medical condition. Birth is not a disease. But the climate around modern birth seems to be polarized over fear. So maybe you've found wonderful holistic support in your care providers, and that's not a bad thing, but it's important to understand the parameters that they're working within. So ideally, you are going to be able to enter that liminal, subtle space of birth, the portal between worlds, with a clear mind and clear heart, with full awareness of your choices and the consequences of those choices. When we talk about planning for our birth, what we're really looking at is, what are our priorities? No matter where or how you're planning to give birth, it's a good idea to learn everything that you can about birth, labor, postpartum, especially, and how to care for your newborn and yourself. There is also something called the 4th trimester. This is the early weeks of mothering. You're really not that separate, even though the cord has been cut. And so this space too deserves its own kind of recognition and honoring. So with this guide, we can go in to labor and birth with eyes wide open, with clear understanding of what you might be facing if you have to engage with the system on any level. So there's kind of 6 topics that we'll talk about: labor, in other words, the end of pregnancy; delivery, pushing your baby out; your newborn. Then we also talk about natural induction, which is to say, it may or may not be an oxymoron. Then I do want to discuss a little bit about medical management of labor and birth, as well as cesarean and postpartum. So technically there's 7 parts. So we're going to go into this with eyes wide open and do the work of worrying.